In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Christ is in our midst. How many of you have heard of St. Arsenios the Cappadocian before? How many of you have? How many of you have, well, if you haven't heard of him, you haven't read his life, so that kind of negates the second question, doesn't it? Well, we celebrated his memory yesterday, and I wanted to read to you a section from his life that was written by Elder Paisios of Mount Athos, who is considered to be a modern-day saint, even though he is not canonized yet. But I wanted to read, as you hear this, remember that this is written from a holy person writing about another holy person that he encountered in his life. You have to understand, too, that Elder Paisios was baptized by St. Arsenios. They were from the Cappadocia area, and actually when Elder Paisios was baptized, his given name was Arsenios, because St. Arsenios was very upset with the people having parties and doing things that were debaucherous and uncalled for as Christians on names days. So what did he do? As he baptized children, they come up and they say, well, we want this young boy to be baptized with the name of John. He'd say, okay. He'd bring the child up and he'd say, the servant of God, Paphnutios, is baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and the people would be like, what did you just do? We wanted his name John. He said, no, you're not going to receive those names. That's not a good name for him to have, or her, or whatever. He would change the names to obscure saints so that the people would not have these parties that would lose their meaning on the feast days. And as we know, as we see in some of the traditions, even birthday parties take on a different flavor, especially when people get older, and they think that there's no judge to answer to at some of the parties, and even some of the parties that are held within churches. Unfortunately, the behavior becomes such that the demeanor is uncalled for. So St. Arsenios knew that, and he changed the names of many of the people. However, this book that's written on his life, which we will soon have in the bookstore, speaks a little bit about his final days. Now, St. Arsenios was a saint. Like I said, we remember him yesterday, but there's nothing written in the Archdiocese online about his life. But we read about how he was misunderstood, and many of the things that he did were seen as being abrasive or rough. But at the end of his life, he is vindicated by the simple acts of his kindness and miracles that were around him. Now, Elder Paisios writes about his life, and he also writes about his father, whose name was Prodromos, who's Elder Paisios' father. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of abnormal, but I want to ask Foti to bring out a chair because I want to read to you as if your father or your mother would read to you from a bedtime story. So I'm going to sit down as I read this, if I can get a chair. Is he back here? There we go. Foti looks a little different. We'll put it in the middle. And I'm going to read to you because I want you to understand that many times the reading in the church needs to be one of a homey posture, if you want to call it that. As you go to bed at night, as you read different things, or you wake up in the morning, many times we read when we're sitting. So I'm going to sit as I read this to you. But Elder Paisios, his father's name was Prodromos, and he was the chanter for St. Arsenios. And when Elder Paisios was collecting all these stories of St. Arsenios, he references his father as Prodromos. He doesn't reference him as my father. So St. Arsenios is in Asia Minor. Now, he writes about it, and he says the exchange of the populations, really, which was the Turkish influx that came in that pushed the Greeks out of there into Greece, or the Turkish people that were Orthodox out of Turkey into Greece. So he refers to that as the exchange of the population from the Christians to the non-Christians. Now, St. Arsenios had gone with his people. He had walked with them. He had healed people on the way. He had done many signs, but he said to them, when he goes to Greece that he will only live for 40 days. So once he sets foot in Greece, he will only live for 40 days. So they left on the eve of the Virgin Mary, which was August 14th. And it says, after many trials and tribulations, the ship docked at a Greek port of St. George in Piraeus. Upon setting foot on Greek soil, they joyfully celebrated that great day, which was the elevation of the precious cross, September 14th in 1924. So St. Arsenios is a current day saint. According to the feast calendar in their homeland, they remained there 3 weeks, confined behind barbed wire at St. George's. And then they went to Kerkyra, where they were temporarily accommodated in Kerkyra's castle. There, however, the good Haji Effendis, which is St. Arsenios, that's the kind of a name that they gave him, became sick and fell ill. And the Pharisiotis, the people of the town, became worried. Against his will, they took him to the city hospital so that he would not be subject to the hardships of the life in the castle. Father Arsenios did not wish to be separated from them in any way and begged them tearfully, "Let me die beside you." But out of love, they did not listen to him. They believed he would recover in a hospital with the care that he would receive and would be with them again, although he had often told them, "In Greece I shall live only 40 days." When the days were at hand, he had, of course, depart for heaven and to help them even more from above, since he had the boldness before God. All told, he lived 2 weeks in Kerkyra's castle, celebrated the Divine Liturgy twice in the Holy Church of St. George. He lived another week in the hospital where he was visited by his concerned townspeople. One day, when Prodromos had visited him again, he asked him for his clothes so that he could have them washed. Father Arsenios replied, "Why bother to wash them? Not tomorrow, but the day after they will be going into the ground." Prodromos did not understand and asked him again, "Give them to me to wash, since you are sickly and old." Father Arsenios replied, "Inasmuch as I'm old, am I not also a monk?" Indeed, he certainly was a monk. On that day, Prodromos saw a louse crawling on him and took it off discreetly to kill it because there were others about. Father Arsenios shouted loudly, Don't kill the poor thing." And he took it out of his hand and at once stuffed it into his clothing and said to Prodromos, "Let it have a little flesh to eat as well, since it found the chance to get near me now. After all, why should the worms eat all the flesh by themselves?" Then he cast an eye around the room at all the visitors and said, The soul is what you must take care of far more than the body, which will go into the earth and be eaten by the worms." And this was his last sermon on the deepest meaning of life. When the others had left and only Prodromos remained, Father Arsenios said to him, "Come, let's bid each other farewell, Prodromos, because the day after tomorrow I am leaving for the next life. Our Panagia came to me yesterday afternoon and told me. She even showed me around the holy mountain as well, and I saw the monasteries, which I've always wanted to see so much, but never had been worthy to do so. I don't know what to tell you, Prodromos. There are so many monasteries on the holy mountain. What grand churches, what magnificence." After that he added, "Don't be upset that your wife Kyriaki will die in 8 days' time. Stephanos' wife also, Al-Malu, will die as well in 13 days. And indeed, these are how those things turned out. So when his own 2 days had gone by, and the day after tomorrow had come for him to take and leave, the true servant of God, Father Arsenios, having received communion, departed for the true life close to Christ. At that moment there was not one townsman beside him. He did not want anyone to stay with him, so that they would not distract him from his eternal prayer. And that was Father Arsenios. This writing of his life is some of the gifts that we have in our church to read the lives of saints, a modern-day saint. Many times we think of the saints and we say, well, it's all storytelling. Well, Elder Paisios went all over Greece to talk to those who knew St. Arsenios and to find out about his life and to learn the different miracles, and also had the blessing of not only having him as his godfather, but also his father as the chanter. And one of the things I wanted to just point out to you that he said was, and just a posture is that the body, we worry so much about our bodies. We worry so much about everything that's tangible. And he says, don't worry about it. Worry about the soul. The soul is the thing that we need to focus on. And for him, many of the miracles that he had, or one of the gifts that he had, I should say, too, was the ability to know things ahead of time. To tell his chanter upon his deathbed, your wife's only going to live for a few more days as well, and so-and-so's wife's going to die in a couple weeks, and don't be sad about that. There's writings of the fathers and modern-day saints as well, where we see that they knew who was going to go, who was going to be with God, because they were so in touch with that world and disconnected from this world that it became clearer that the person had a window into the next life, but more so than just a window, they had one foot in that life and one foot in this life. So what does this say? It says, well, he was misunderstood in his life. Many of the things that he did, people said he was abrasive. Like, I'll give you an example. One time a lady came to make him food, and she said, well, he's a monk and he needs food, and I'll make him food. So she comes and she brings pots and different things of food, and he said, it's not hot enough. And he sends her back. He says, go heat it up and bring it back. She brings it back, and he tastes it, and he says, this is terrible. This is terrible food. Why would you bring this to me when you know that I like my food hot and I like it tasty, and this is disgusting. I can make my own food. Let me make my own food. Don't ever make me food again. And the lady walked away. She was in tears and crying. And then somebody had explained to her that the reason he did that was because he's a monk. And if he wanted to be married, he would have got married and he would have had his wife make him food. But it's inappropriate for a woman just to come over and start making food for a monk. So he would use that particular disposition that was misunderstood to get his point across, and then people later would say, I made the mistake. I should have never decided I was going to be the caretaker for the monk. He had nothing in his final days, and as the book continues to go on to say, that the only thing he had in his hand when he died was the relics of St. John Chrysostom. That was the only thing he had. He had nothing else. He had no money, he had no fame, he had no clothing, he had no house, he had nothing except the relics of St. John Chrysostom. And those were passed on, and now the church has his relics. And his relics have been miraculous to many people. In fact, Elder Paisios had one of his teeth as a relic, and he had it in a reliquary cross around his neck, and he would bless people that were ill with his tooth, and they were healed. And we have this beautiful saint yesterday that we remembered, and all these saints this past week have just been a powerhouse of saints, from Archangel Michael to St. Nectarios to St. Arsenios to today St. Minas, who is another magnificent saint in our church. But to think about how much we miss by waking up in the morning and going about our day and not learning about the saints and not learning. You know, I took time to read this to you because I don't know if you'll ever get this book. I don't know if you'll ever have the desire to read this book, but we get a glimpse, a clear glimpse, a first-hand rendition or narrative of the saint on his deathbed, and to be spoken to and to teach us from his deathbed on how we need to live and how we need to think. So I pray that the prayers of St. Arsenios the Cappadocian, that he is with us always, and that you take time, and as soon as we get this book, I know Terry's probably shuddering in the pew back there going, oh, here we go, I got to order more books. As soon as we get this book, I encourage you to read it, and to not only just hear the saints on a Sunday and say, oh, who's that? Go find out who they are. Because I guarantee when you go to find out who these saints are, they're going to speak to you, and they're going to help you, and they're going to guide you, and you're going to learn from their lives. Just as we learn from so many writings and teachings throughout church history, we need to also delve into the saints' lives and to learn about them. So may their prayers be with us. And the prayers of St. Minas. Now, St. Minas, he's written about in the Archdiocese, so you can read about him today, but not everything's written about him. But he's also a saint. Does anybody know what he's the patron saint for? Okay, he's the patron saint for impossible tasks and also when you lose something. And the reason why, you have to go read about that too, because I could read to you all day, but I'm sure you would get tired, and it's also our initiative to go out and to learn about these saints. Amen.